Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Today I'm going to read the book Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrita, 8th chapter. When we approach some gentleman and request him to become a reader of back to head, sometimes we are replied with the words no time. They say that they are too busy in earning money for maintaining the body and soul together. But when we ask them what do they mean by the soul, they have nothing to reply. Dr. Meghnad Saha, a great scientist, was busily going to a meeting of the Planning Commission. Unfortunately, while going in his car on the road, he died and could not ask death to wait because he had no time at that moment. Dr. Ansari, the great Congress leader, while dying in a moving train on his way to home, said that he was himself a medical man and almost all his family men were so, but death is so cruel that he was dying without any medical treatment. Therefore, death has been described in the Bhagavad as the indefatigable death is waiting everyone, although everybody thinks that he may not die. There is life after death. The busy man should try to know this also as to whither he is going. This life is but a spot in his longer sojourn, and a sane person should not be busy with a sport only. Nobody says that the body should not be maintained, but everybody should know from Bhagavad Gita that the body is the outward dress and the soul is the real person who puts on the dress. So, if the dress is taken care of only without any care of the real person, it is sheer foolishness and waste of time. Abhay was an unusual newspaper vendor. He didn't. Abhay was an unusual newspaper vendor. He didn't loudly hawk his paper on the street or sell it from a newsstand. He approached individuals quietly as they sat to drink tea, or he would call on acquaintances in their offices or places of business, taking a copy from the stack he carried underneath his arm. He would present what appeared to be an ordinary tabloid newspaper with bold black headlines across the front page. But what odd headlights, the lowest of the mind philosophical problems within social awareness, suffering of humanity, the pure consciousness of nationalism. Anyone could tell at a glance that this was no ordinary newspaper. Abe would say something to try to convince them to take it anyway before they said no time. On behalf of his spiritual master and the previous Vaishnava authorities, he was playing a role, the newspaper salesman, a smiling demeanor, a gentlemanly invitation. No, it wasn't an ordinary newspaper, but they would find it interesting, and it cost only 6 paisa. Thus, he was extending the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, handing out the truth of the Vedas in the easy to take form of a newspaper. Despite his desperate poverty and the urgency of his message, his writings was never shrill, strident, or fanatical. He wrote expecting to find his reader prepared to hear sound philosophy and always willing to accept the truth, especially when presented logically and relevantly and supported by the authoritative Vedic literature. Although experience on the streets of Delhi had shown him that people were shallow, distracted, and uninterested in self realization, he knew that most people, at least at some time in their lives, pondered the crucial themes of philosophy whether God exists, whether he is a person, why there is suffering. So, appeal to their higher sentiments. Spring of 1956 brought visits from US Secretary of State Dulles, and a few days later, Lord Mountbatten, the former Governor General of India, who was greeted at the airport by thousands. Then came the celebration of the one sacred day of Holi, when urchins spray all passers by with colored dyes. Prime Minister Nehru toured the Delhi slums expressing disgust at the prevailing conditions. He announced India's intention to develop atomic energy, stressing its peaceful uses. The weather warmed. A border clash began between India and Pakistan. Delhi railway workers went on strike. Meanwhile, Abe continued to preach. He somehow managed to meet the financial, editorial, and printing demands and publish his sixth issue
Hare
of the.
Krishna Mataji, did we read
Uh,
this before? Let me see.
no, Prabhu, you gave me a different one yesterday too.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. One second. I,
I was
that's,
wondering what happened.
sorry, yeah, this is the one. Yeah.
Yeah, this is one I read last night. Mm. The chanting process of the holy name of God, as conducted by the propaganda of back to Godhead, is not pleasing to the superficial pleasure hunters, describing men and women in indecent literatures in national news, but it is a means of relishing the transcendental eternal life. In addition to selling back to Godhead at tea stalls and delivering copies to donors, Abai also mailed out free copies both within India and abroad. For years, the vast audience of English speaking readers outside India and concerned him, and he wanted to reach them. Having gathered addresses of libraries, universities, and cultural and government outlets outside India, he mailed as many back to Godheads as he could afford. He prepared letter for his Western readers, suggesting that they should be even more receptive than his countrymen. Although the message contained in Back to Godhead are all gifts of the ancient sages of India who actually realize the absolute truth. Yet, at the present moment, the so called leaders of India are too much enamored by the Western way of material advancement of knowledge. They are completely neglecting the treasure house of knowledge left by the sages. You gentlemen of the Western countries have seen much about material science, and yet peace is not within your control. In most cases, you may be feeling the want of peace, although you have enough materially. This basic defect of materialism remains undetected by the misleaders of India, and therefore they are not serious about going back to Godhead, the ultimate aim of life's journey. On the home front, Abhay sent copies of his latest issues of Back to Godhead to the President of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, along with a letter warning of the perilous fate that awaits a society conducted by asuras. Please, therefore, save them from the great fall down. Abey's letter of November 21st was outspoken. I have got the clue of going back to Godhead just after leaving my present material body, and in order to take along with me all my contemporary men and women of the world. I have started my paper Back to Godhead as one of the means to the way. Please don't think of me as something wonderful or a madman when I say that I shall go back to Godhead after leaving my present material body. It is quite possible for everyone and all of us. Abe requested His Excellency at least to glance over the headlines of the enclosed 1 dozen copies of Back to Godhead and consider granting the editor an interview. There was immense work to be done on behalf of India's spiritual heritage, and there should be a specific Ministry of Spiritual Affairs for this purpose. I am crying alone in the wilderness at the present moment, wrote Abe, but His Excellency never replied. In his Back to Godhead, Abe was making propaganda against the atheistic view. In Hope Against Hope, he frankly admitted that 80% of the people he met while selling Back to Godhead were atheists. Sometimes we met gentlemen. According to these gentlemen, economic conditions of the Indian people deteriorated on account of their too much faith in God, and the sooner they forget everything about God, and it is better for them. But we cannot agree with this atheistic conclusion of such up-to-date gentlemen devoid of the sense of Godhead. Abe argued that although independent India was now educating her citizens in godless materialism, her economic conditions were not improving. Many Indians did not even have the bare necessities of life. He cited that 120,000 were unemployed in Delhi. Some of the well posted government servants or some of the fortunate businessmen may feel themselves happy, but 90% of their brothers, citizens, do not know how to meet the both ends together, and therefore the economic condition is definitely not satisfactory. I'll stop here, Prabhu.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In today's reading, we can see that how Srila Prabhupada worked tirelessly to propagate the message of Krishna consciousness through his magazine Back to Godhead, despite widespread atheism and materialism in post independence India. He wrote, printed, and distributed the paper himself, selling copies at tea stalls, sending them to donors, libraries, universities, and even mailing pre copies abroad to reach Western readers, whom he believed might be more receptive than our fellow Indians. In his writings, he criticized India's growing neglect of spiritual knowledge in favor of Western materialism, arguing that true peace and prosperity were impossible without recognizing the Supreme Lord's proprietorship. He warned of the karmic consequences of greed and irreligion and urged leaders, including President Rajendra Prasad, to establish a Ministry of Spiritual Affairs, though his appeals went unanswered. We can see here Prabhupada's resilience. Whatever hardship comes in his way, public ridicule, personal hardship, and even physical suffering, Abe easily bounced back. Abe continued preaching that mortality, honesty, and peace could only be revived through genuine God consciousness. Abe dedicated himself fully to the mission of leading humanity back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.